Welcome to ResponseABLE Parenting, the podcast that shows you how to parent in alignment to your emotions, needs, and goals versus your programming, bad advice, and let's face it, outdated strategies that just don't work. You'll get in the trenches support on nervous system and emotional regulation, critical mindset shifts, stronger communication strategies, and more. In this podcast, you'll gain transformational tools that take you from reacting to every frustration to responding with clarity, regulation, and finally setting the example you desire for your kids. I'm Becky Jennings, your new parenting coach, and this is the ResponseABLE Parenting podcast. Let's get into it. I know the number one rule of Fight Club is you never talk about Fight Club, but it's just too good to not talk about. So this entire episode, I'm going to be spilling the beans on Fight Club. And honestly, this is just my call out to find a Fight Club in your town because dang, it's really helpful. So anyways, we're talking about the self-defense class that I joined in my community. And honestly, when the moms who invited me to do it were talking about it, the way that they were lighting up, the way that their face changed, their body changed, their posture changed, I was like, okay, I could use some of that little energy right there. So I went, and the first day that I joined, I thought it'd be like an hour kickboxing class. That's really what I fully thought it would be. I thought it'd be like a kickboxing class, and we'd get sweaty, we'd kick, we'd punch some bags, we'd do some things, and I thought that we could call it a day. That thing lasts for hours. I'm talking hours. Some of them don't leave till 11 o'clock, and it starts at 7. I left early at 9 p.m. So it's 2 hours of self-defense training, which, I mean, you could stay longer. You could stay till 10 p.m. You could stay till 11. It doesn't matter. The guy stays there the whole time. I'm obsessed because not just for how the value of the class, how it ends up being like $5 an hour for how long you're staying there, but the mindset shift, the physical ability to release all the pent up frustration, all the building rage. It's amazing. And I have been invited to the Fight Club chat, which is very exciting. I am now on the text chain. Guys, it's exciting. So I want to talk about Fight Club, and I want to say one thing first. If you are a woman, if you are a mom in America, and you're feeling a little twitchy with how things are going, and you've been feeling, how do I say this in the best possible way? Like everything you ever knew was wrong, and you're seeing all the connections to all the things, and now you have even more fear about your child's future, and you feel even more helpless about what you can and cannot control. Join a self-defense class and join a Fight Club or create a Fight Club because it's wonderful and it really helps. And by the way, it's like a actual scheduled, there's a sensei, it's in a dojo. Like we're not in a basement like Tyler Durden. So, okay. Anyways, my sensei is hilarious, but he's also incredibly practical. And so he will give us real situations, and basically we have to practice what the ideal outcome would be. Oh my gosh, I can already see your eyes rolling, being like, Becky, you're doing it again. You're linking it to parenting. And yes, I am, because that is what I do. And that is all I think about all the time. Okay, so we did this simulation where, let's say there's multiple attackers, multiple stimulus, maybe multiple frustrations, maybe multiple children. Okay. And you are trapped in a room. I mean, honestly, the parallels are uncanny, if you will. So he is basically standing there and he is like, you have to use the tools that you have to your advantage to kind of like either ward off people or, find the nearest exit and yada, yada, yada. He's teaching us not parental situations. He's teaching us how to actually like survive attacks. As he's talking about this, he mentions control. he mentions control, and he says something, and I can't even remember exactly, but it hit me in a way that at the time I really needed to hear it. And something about parenting and something about life in general is so often we need to hear the same lesson over and over and over and over and over again. And then one time it just like lands that perfectly right way that you're like, oh, yeah, yeah, that was it. I knew that, but I didn't know how to like fully integrate that. And essentially, he was saying control. Like when you're in a heightened pressured situation where you feel like you are going to potentially die because your attackers are coming at you and you feel trapped, he said, the frantic people in the room will be the ones that likely get jumped, get attacked, or, get really hurt, or worst case scenario, don't make it out alive. It's the people who stay clear headed and assess the dangers and try to solve the puzzle by controlling themselves are the people who have the best chance at surviving. So we do this thing called puzzles where we practice what we've been taught with somebody, basically a sparring partner, and we try to, as the attacker, win the fight, and as the attackee or the victim, we try to get out of the puzzle that the person is creating for us. Only using the tools and the strategies that we have to our knowledge, and then seeing how we can get creative with those tools. So maybe I only know how to block a punch, right? But can I, with my other parts of my body, with my leg, can I knee them to the stomach? Can I sweep the leg? Can I do something else that would be kind of surprising to the other person? I'm moving off a little bit of a tangent, but what he was saying ultimately is we are going to be presented with scenarios and it's not going to be the perfect simulation. It's not going to be where the person's like, I'm going to steal your purse. And we're like, okay, let me put my left foot forward, my right foot back. Let me put this arm here. Like, that's never going to happen. Right. And with parenting, very similar, we are struck mostly off guard by things that we weren't expecting, behaviors in the moment that we don't want to see. Or maybe bedtime is going really, really well, but then it falls off at some point, and then we're trying to regain control of the situation because we're trying to maintain the simulation, but it's changed. And so that's where we often miss the mark, right? Because we're trying to keep a train that has gone off the tracks. We're trying to heavy lift that entire train and put it right back on the original tracks, which has never worked for any of us to put that thing right back on the same path that it just derailed from. So, with the tools that we have, how can we get creative? How can we pivot a little bit? And how can we maintain control over self in order to have the best possible outcome, i.e., survive the situation? And so I wanted to kind of play with that and talk about some situations that might arise that kind of throw us off track and see how we can get creative and solve the puzzle. Can I be super real with you and tell you a personal story? A few years back, my son, the whole reason why I do the job I do today, was having one of those fiery moments. He was talking back, demanding it be his way. He was refusing to listen to any of our solutions, and the moment was getting really intense. My husband looked at me and said, well, you know all the parenting stuff, fix this. I completely froze. All the scripts from the books I'd read, all the strategies from the podcasts I'd listened to completely disappeared from my brain in that moment. But based on the volume of challenges that we were having with our strong-willed ADHD son, I knew I had to figure out a different way, because panicking in the moment and grasping at anything only to not follow through at all and end up yelling just wasn't working. From this experience, I developed a repeatable, easy to remember, and easy to follow system that literally works with every single triggering moment. I can attest to it because there are many in my life. Now I can show up the way I want. I can communicate in a way that actually resonates with my strong-willed child. If this sounds like a solution for what's happening in your home, take these next 2 steps. Number one, watch the free training about my rewiring process in the show notes. And then number two, book your free call. On that call, we will talk about what's happening in your home and you will get a customized solution that works best for you. I assure you, this doesn't have to feel as hard day in and day out as it does. There is the solution, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it. All right, let's talk about not listening the first time because I think that bothers the daylights out of all of us. So, not listening or just a kind of ignoring or kind of just doing their whatever they're doing, staying engaged in what they're doing, or maybe even being like sassy or the back talk that comes from like us making a totally benign, very expected request like, "Hey, can you bring your plate to the sink?" Right? And we get, "Oh, God, ugh, mom, or like 1 second, or can you?" Right? Come on, let's not lie. We've all had a little bit of sass, a little bit of back talk from our ADHD children, maybe even our strong-willed children, maybe even the child, the golden child. Who knows? We've That's a new puzzle, right? The kid who is our quote unquote good kid, the one who doesn't give us too much trouble, and then all of a sudden they give us a little bit of trouble. Ooh, that's a new puzzle to solve. Okay. So let's say they, you know, aren't following, they aren't doing what we ask them to do, and the train has gone off the tracks. Typically, our heavy lift to try to get that same train that has just derailed on the tracks would be to repeat the same thing. Maybe we're doing it a little bit more aggressively this time. We're with our bigness and our loudness, we are showing how serious we are that they take that plate to the sink, right? We're getting when you think about this stuff, when you say it out loud later, you're like, "Why? Why so loud over the plate?" It's a plate. But then, we bring in the stories of, like, if they can't do it now, then they're never gonna be able to do it, when they're older, or they'll always treat me with disrespect. How they do the small things is how they do the big things, right? We can really intensify a very simple experience with our own stories and make the whole situation 10 times worse, which is going to build in more repeatable resistance for our kids. That's a whole conversation for a later date. But so, how could we get creative and solve this puzzle while getting it maybe on a new track, but the outcome still leads to the same town? Like the plate still makes it to the sink. So, how I like to do this is I kind of like to run through a couple different things. How can I add some silliness and humor to this? Okay. I think I mentioned in another podcast recently that you could add like a silly accent. You could pretend to take on the persona of an animal in your house, and kind of from their perspective, map out what the next steps might be. I did this actually with my another puzzle that I recently solved with my youngest. Is he really, really, really did not want to go to sleep. He kept coming out, kept coming out. Again, the train was off the tracks, and it was like 8:30, maybe even closer to 8:45 at this point, and I was, like, losing my patience because I was exhausted. I could tell he was exhausted, but something just wasn't clicking, and he could not go to sleep. And this is another moment where we can only control ourselves, right? I cannot go into the room, close his eyes for him, and shut his body down. So we got creative, and I asked him to show the puppy, who likes to jump up into the bed and kind of say goodnights with us. I asked my son to show the puppy the steps to fall asleep. And if he could show the puppy, maybe the puppy would fall asleep. And then what do you know? About 3 minutes later, he was asleep, which was like a big win. So I was able to kind of use a little bit of novelty, a little bit of like creativity there. So with the plate situation, sometimes I do really, when you get to know me on a personal level, you know that like sarcasm is a little bit of my love language. And so sometimes I'll lean in and I'll start looking under couch cushions, or I'll start looking in cabinets, and I'll start kinda creating a little bit of, like, ruckus, and I'm like, "Where is it?" And my kids are gonna immediately, "What do you mean? Where's what? Where's what?" And I'm like, "Oh, you that thing, you know what to do? Like, you just lost it, taking the plate to the sink." And they're like, Mom," because they know I just got them. My oldest will be like, "Sick burn, Mom." And thanks. I still got it. Just how can we solve the problem, solve the puzzle with humor, with play, with curiosity, with creativity? Could we almost like help them just get that first step going? And we can do it in a super silly way. I know my son likes to play this game called Ragdoll. And that is one of his go-to transition buffers, the thing that helps him stay activated from leaving one thing that he was really, really having fun with and moving to a really boring thing. So as he'll go, "Uh-oh, uh-oh, I'm turning into a rag doll." And I don't always have the capacity to do this, and I'll try to pivot in another way somehow. Um, but it's physically pretending as if he's like a puppet, moving his body in the way that needs to be moved in order to achieve the thing. And of course, it's hilarious because it's impossible to not laugh when you're trying to walk somebody's body that is full dead weight, and it's like a weekend at Bernie's kind of situation that happens. So how can we get creative and solve that puzzle? And again, I going back over and over in my head to what my sensei says is that in the environment, in the experience, there's going to be so many moments where you feel off center, where you feel under attack, where you feel like you might actually be losing this battle, right? Maybe there's multiple attackers in an actual live situation where, somebody is taking your purse or somebody is trying to steal your keys or something, right? And the the calmest person is the person who will be able to, assess the situation and use the tools that they can have, like that are available to them. And so keep coming back to this situation of, I'm viewing quote unquote the attackers as the external stimulus. I'm viewing the attackers as maybe the bad behavior. I'm viewing the attackers as the unwanted back and forth dynamic that's currently going on. So when we can kind of peel ourselves back and look at each situation and gamify it in that way of how can I solve this puzzle? The train has gone off the tracks in an unexpected way instead of reacting from a place of fear, from a place of dysregulation, from just a place of adding our own chaos to the existing moment. How can I solve the puzzle creatively? So we talked about like a little bit of back talk. I shared a puzzle solving about bedtime. And, I think it's just maybe like even homework, right? That could be such a hard puzzle to solve sometimes because we see the external factor of the time, the clock ticking. We see bedtime rapidly approaching. We see only one question on the math assignment has been answered. They're currently screaming at us. They're melting down. How can we solve this puzzle? Right? What control do we have in the situation? Maybe we try to engage music. Maybe we try to put some bilateral stimulation music on in the background to help kind of neutralize the environment. Maybe we offer a glass of cold water to both of us and we're drinking a glass of cold water before we even move on to the next question. Maybe we set a timer for 5 minutes and see if we can answer one question in 5 minutes. Maybe we are literally doing our spelling words and we are tossing a ball back and forth as we're practicing the spelling words. There are so many different options that we can utilize. And inside my program, I have so many different techniques and tools and options that we can test and try as parents of ADHD kids. I think when we take the viewpoint of the only thing in this situation that I can control is the energy and the creativity that I bring to the table because I cannot, as one single person take an entire train and put it back on the original tracks once it's derailed. So instead, I have to quite literally rebuild a new track, and it might be made out of the most obscure materials. But at the same time, who cares? You're going to get to the same destination. It might not look the way you intended, but at least we get to the same destination. So I just want to offer that as a little bit of a perspective shift, as a little bit of a way to kind of remove the perfectionist tendencies that we have, especially with our ADHD kids and the future tripping that we have about like whether or not they're going to be successful if they can't do this little tiny thing that we're asking them to do now. So a little bit of perspective shift. The calmest person in the room is the most effective person in the room. And we can only control what we add to the situation. We cannot control their reaction. We cannot control how they accept our creative idea. We can't control that. We can't control how they're going to talk to us. We can request how they talk to us. We can put some parameters around how they talk to us. We can even put some consequences or outcomes if they continue to choose to talk to us in a certain way. We still cannot control it. I can't force my kid to go to sleep. I can do everything in my power to create the environment that allows for sleep, but I cannot control whether or not his eyes close and his REM cycles start. And I think that that is something we know, but we don't embody. And so because we don't embody it, we take it very personally and we get very triggered by these things that we actually have no control over. I mean, that's a whole story to that too. Maybe I do a whole nother podcast on that because it's all about, perception, perfectionism, validation, all just like a host of stuff that gets all jumbled up in that. But if we can do ourselves a favor, and once we notice that the train is off the tracks, instead of trying to Herculean use all of our force, all of our might, and get that derailed train back on the original tracks, we should just at that point say, okay, time to pivot. Anyways, I hope you found that perspective shift helpful. Remember that you are only in control of yourself, and you are in control of what you bring to the table when the train goes off the tracks. So that is all for this week, and I will see you in another episode. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the ResponseABLE Parenting podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.